Can Jeff Brom and company go back down into the state of Florida and get another top edge rusher in the 2024 class? Well, we're going to talk about the recruitment of Booker Pickett Jr. here in just a moment, plus more. So with that being said, let's get right on into the show.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? Welcome into another episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. As always, I want to say thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, the Locked On Louisville podcast is free on all streaming services, 5 days a week, your team every day. As I mentioned in the opener, the Louisville Cardinals made the list cut for 2024 highly rated prospect Booker Pickett Jr. We'll talk about whether or not the Cardinals can go back down into Florida and get another top edge rusher in the 2024 cycle. We'll talk about this previous week's action for the women's basketball team, extending their winning streak to 4 with victories over Virginia and Clemson. And then to conclude the show, we will dive into a weekly mailbag segment. But beginning with the football recruiting side of things, obviously 2 prospects committed in the 2024 class, both from the state of Florida, 5-star edge rusher TJ Capers and 4-star running back Isaac Brown. Obviously, the staff has been very busy, as most all of the staffs in college football have been. Brom has been going all over the country, especially kind of centralized in the southeast, all up and down the eastern shoreboard. Essentially, offering a lot of players in the process. We've seen, if you look at the episodes from the previous week or so, Brom and company are continuing to try to prioritize, the local areas while also going down into Texas, North Carolina, Missouri, you name it. But one of the most welcomed trends that we've seen since Flyville became a thing, outside of the California side of things, which is unique in its own ways, we saw in the 2023 class the makings of the pipeline with the state of Florida, from Louisville to South Florida, start to get revitalized a little bit, right? I mean, you saw a couple 4-stars, William Fowles and Stanquan Clark, Kataris Hicks, multiple players down in the state of Florida that decided to come up to Louisville, and it seems like so far the trend is continuing, and in a big way. You get a 5-star prospect, TJ Capers, top 10 player in the country, to commit to Louisville early on. Obviously, you have to keep these guys committed, but multiple prospects since then have included Louisville in their list cuts respectively. Well, another one has cut his list to 9. That is 4-star prospect Booker Pickett Jr., the 6'3" edge rusher from Tampa, Florida, ranked as the 52nd best prospect in the country according to the 24/7 Sports Composite, the 6th best edge rusher, and the 11th best recruit in the state of Florida. Cut his list to 9 on Tuesday evening. And included in that list cut, along with the Cardinals, you have Georgia, Ohio State, USC, Tennessee, Penn State, Miami, Florida State, and South Carolina. Has 36 scholarship offers to play D1 at the next level. But needless to say, this is going to be a very, very high-profile recruitment. A lot of big dogs in this recruitment, so to speak. Booker is a possible legacy recruit for a couple different schools. His dad played at Miami and played in the NFL. His uncle played at Ohio State. Not to mention you have another in-state school like Florida State in the mix. And then on top of that, back-to-back national champion Georgia Bulldogs also in the mix. Tennessee has been doing very well on the recruiting trail. Penn State, USC, South Carolina, also no slouches. But he also has offers from Auburn, Colorado, Michigan, Notre Dame, so on and so forth. Needless to say, he's a very elite prospect. What's interesting to me, and we talked about how potent the state of Florida was in recruiting like a month ago, He's ranked 52nd in the country, and there are 10 other players from the state of Florida alone that are ranked higher than him. TJ Capers is one included. So very interesting here. What type of player is Booker Pickett? You have, when you hear the word edge rusher, you kind of wonder, well, is he more of a traditional defensive end, outside linebacker, so on and so forth? This is what Andrew Ivins, the Southeast recruiting analyst at 24/7 Sports, had to say. Compared him to Chris Rump II from my Los Angeles Chargers. He said this: a dangly speed rusher that's full of juice, racked up 60 sacks his first 3 seasons at the varsity level, including 30 as a junior. Size hasn't been verified in a while, but he is believed to be over 6'3" and carrying roughly 205 pounds. Obviously, we'll need to add some mass moving forward, but bloodline suggests that shouldn't be much of an issue, as dad played defensive end in Miami while uncle was an NFL defensive tackle. Terrorizes opposing offensive linemen and quarterbacks with an elite first step. However, isn't one that just wins with his get-off, as he's already well-versed in a few different pass rushing moves and can swim/rip his way around the edge. Ability to dip and bend is extremely encouraging at this stage in his development. So is the fact that he understands backside pursuit and is constantly trying to produce negative plays. Biggest question moving forward will likely surround his future position/role. Seemed destined to tack on muscle and settle in as a jack linebacker in a 3-4 front, but might be able to eventually put his hand in the dirt and operate as a wide 9 in a 4-3 look, depending on how his body fills out. Regardless, should be viewed as one of the top pass rushers in the 2024 cycle and has the production to back it up. NFL upside. Junior All-American from Max Preps this past season, 56 tackles, 16 of those for a loss, to go along with 30 sacks. That's absolutely nuts. That's third in the state. How is that only third in the state? My goodness. Needless to say, Booker is an elite prospect. How legitimate of a chance does Louisville have? Obviously, every recruitment is different, right? But with Coach Hova on staff, with how Flyville has done in the state of Florida over the past 2 classes, you have to believe that Louisville has a fighting chance. And you'll say, well, you've got all these other schools in the mix. I'm not saying that Louisville's going to win this recruitment. I'm not saying that they're even going to be seriously involved. They are in the top 9, so that means something. So I feel like a broken record. What needs to happen? Well, Louisville needs to get him on campus. They need to get him on a visit unofficially this spring or this summer, get him on campus officially in the fall, and try to work towards getting a commitment, in the future term. But ultimately, I think the TJ Capers commitment makes things more legitimate in the way that the thought process was probably like, okay, getting a couple prospects like Isaac Brown, Stanquan Clark, William Fowles, this is no disrespect toward them. Let me go ahead and get that out of the way. What I'm saying is that you're not going down into Florida and getting the best of the best, rankings-wise. You're not going and getting the top 75, top 100 players, right? Or at least you weren't until you got TJ Capers, but you weren't getting them. You were getting the lower 4 stars that kind of get overlooked by the in-state or the SEC programs around the area, and that's okay. That's kind of what Louisville has made their living off of in the past 2 decades when recruiting the state of Florida, is the low 4 stars, high 3 stars. Excuse me, I have the hiccups. But now with the TJ Capers commitment, with Dylan Stevenson, from Columbus High School showing a ton of interest in Louisville, with a lot of other players kind of showing interest in Louisville, I think that the TJ Capers commitment creates a lot of momentum in the state of Florida alone, not only in the southern part of the state around Miami, Dade County, Fort Lauderdale, all that area, but Tampa. When we talked about the Florida State, or I'm sorry, the state of Florida, the Sunshine State recruiting, the area of Tampa is extremely abundant with recruiting talent. A lot of talented recruits in that area. So I think that, like I said, are the Cardinals going to be involved seriously? I would argue that they probably already are if they're in the top 9 and they're included with a list, or in a list with all of these other top juggernauts in college football, so to speak. So I think that actions will speak louder than words at this point. It's going to depend on if Louisville can get him on visits, things of that nature. I won't write Louisville off, considering that they did the impossible and got a 5-star linebacker. I'm not saying that the Cardinals are going to obviously win this recruitment, but you have to think that at least Jeff Brom and company have a chance with what they've been able to do in the NIL realm and much more. So We'll continue to talk about football recruiting as we see news, which there is abundance of offers going out, so we will continue to talk about that. But for the second segment of the show, we'll talk about the successful week for the Louisville women's basketball team, 2-0 after defeating both Virginia and Clemson. We'll talk about those two victories here in just a second after we talk about our friends and the title sponsor of the show, FanDuel. The midway point of the NBA season is here, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe and secure, super easy to use. All of the bets for this week, NBA-wise, I thought what was very interesting to me were the totals for my Houston Rockets in terms of the spread coming up. I know not the greatest season, but the spreads are pretty interesting and almost kind of favorable for the Rockets. But nonetheless, you can also talk about player props like player points for Jalen Green, Jabari Smith, so on and so forth. Just so many different options. So don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Hey, Cardinal fans, thanks again for making Locked On Louisville your first listen every day. Make sure you check out our brand new podcast, Locked On College Basketball. Everything you need to know about college basketball all in one place. Plus, hear from big-name experts, insiders, coaches, and players. Locked On College Basketball, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Okay, heading on into the second segment of the show, we talked a little bit before the advertisement break about the Louisville women's basketball team going 2-0. It's extending the winning streak to 4. After losing back-to-back games against NC State and Wake Forest, it was clear that something needed to change for Louisville. The Cardinals went up to Syracuse and won by double digits. They got a very big momentum-building win against North Carolina a week ago, and then this past week, a win at Virginia and a win versus Clemson. On a 4-game winning streak, the Cardinals are 19-8. They are solely tied for third in the ACC. Duke is 12-2, Notre Dame 11-3, Louisville and Virginia Tech both at 10-4. So there are 4 games left in the conference slate, 2 times against the 10th-ranked Notre Dame Fighting Irish. You have Boston College on the road and then Miami as well. But nonetheless, this past week's action, the Cardinals struggled in the matchup against Virginia early on. They trailed 34. I can't read this right. 34-26. I'm losing my eyesight. So the Cardinals didn't necessarily start out well at all, but with a big third quarter performance, they outscored the Cavaliers 15-9 in the third quarter, 22-10 in the fourth quarter. Hailey Van Lith led the way with 17 for the Cards in this one. Scoring responsibilities for Louisville pretty much struggled. 37% from the field, 27% from the three-point line. Got some help from Chrislyn Carr off the bench, which if you haven't been watching, Chrislyn Carr, Morgan Jones, the 2 ACC transfers, have been coming off the bench. Norika Konno, Mykasa Robinson have been starting, along with Nyla Harris has been starting over Liz Dixon and Josie Williams. But Marissa Russell had 9. Morgan Jones had 8. Other than that, no other starter had more than 6. Not a very good offensive performance for the Cards, but were able to start to turn it around in the second half. And that was the big thing, forcing turnovers in that second half. Turnovers actually plagued Louisville in this one. They had 1 more than Virginia. But nonetheless, the Cardinals did shoot 10 more free throws, and they made 9 more of those. So, 76% from the line. So winning by 10, that kind of checks out. Ultimately, sometimes, games aren't pretty, performances aren't pretty, but you do what you can to get the win. One thing that Louisville has sort of utilized at times this season is when that offense is struggling, they've seen the defense step up their efforts to the point to where they're doing just what they need to do to win. And not every win's going to be pretty. Not every loss is going to be encouraging. So you have to, kind of roll with the punches and just accept the notion that, hey, look, sometimes tough games happen. I know that with the season that hasn't necessarily lived up to the expectations for Louisville. Kind of makes it a little bit more frustrating when you do have these games. At the same time, it's encouraging to see, a lackluster performance still end up being a win, because that kind of results to that Louisville swagger, that Louisville hard-nosed style of basketball that has kind of been a trademark of this program over the past, decade to 2 decades since Jeff Walz took over. But that wasn't the case against the Clemson Tigers. Louisville opened up with a big lead. They went up 51-22 at the halftime intermission. The game was pretty much over. They did get outscored in the next two quarters, but at that point, it's pretty much it's pretty much out of reach. I know that you saw, the starters play the majority of the game. But nonetheless, when you go about 30, it's like sometimes you might take your foot off the gas a little bit. But regardless, very solid first half. You had 4 players in double figures. Hailey Van Lith led the way with 19 points, 5 assists. Norika Konno had 12. Mykasa Robinson with 10. Chrislyn Carr with 12 as well. So overall, I think it was a very balanced performance. Olivia Cochran had 7. Morgan Jones 7. Marissa Russell 7. Morgan Jones had 6. So you had, 7 players with at least 6 points, which is something to look forward to if you're the Cardinals. A lot better shooting. They were 12 of 24 from the three-point line. Three-point shooting and defending the three-point line has kind of been one of the Achilles heels of this team. And Sunday was pretty much a breath of fresh air. Not only did they go 12 for 24 to shoot at a 50%, mark from behind the arc, they also held Clemson to 1 of 8, which is good for about 12.5%. Clemson shot more free throws, but Louisville shot about 48% from the field, 30 of 62. They forced 15 turnovers. They had 15 turnovers themselves. But one thing that was encouraging, 23 assists to 15 turnovers. So it was nice to see the ball flow. It was nice to see the offense kind of come from a lot of different players. That's the main thing, and one of the main issues for this team, it seems like, is that lack of consistency scoring overall. You know that Hailey Van Lith is going to get hers. You know that there's probably going to be one other player like a Chrislyn Carr, like a Morgan Jones, that's going to rise up and score double figures. But for Louisville to be really successful, and more importantly, make a deep run in the ACC tournament, and thus in turn a deep run in the postseason of the NCAA tournament, it's going to be a matter of getting that scoring production from more than just Hailey Van Lith. If you can get Chrislyn Carr where she's scoring in double figures, same thing with Norika Konno, who shot very well, 4 of 7 from behind the arc. If Mykasa Robinson is scoring in double figures, teams are in trouble. 10 points, 9 assists. And that's no disrespect to Mykasa, but, known as the Swiss Army knife that isn't, known for her scoring, but, known for her defense, her passing, her leadership, everything else. The most career games played in Louisville history for a reason. She is a key part of this team, and this team couldn't do what they do without her. But if she's scoring in double figures, that is such a luxury for the Louisville Cardinals. Something to focus on. They need to get a little bit more production from their front court. I believe that you're going to need to get more from Josie Williams, Liz Dixon, Nyla Harris. I know that it seemed like the rotation was a little bit more guard heavy against Clemson, but even said, I think that this team still needs to get some more front court production, because I think it keeps defenses honest, and that's something to look forward to. But overall, 4-game winning streak for the Cardinals. As I mentioned, the team is 19-8, 4 regular season games to go. 2 games against Notre Dame upcoming on Thursday at Notre Dame, number 10 in the country. The Fighting Irish will host the Cardinals at 7 o'clock. Huge, possible postseason implication for the Cardinals, with 2 of the remaining 4 games against a top 10 opponent. And then you have Miami, who is 16-9 on the season, so they are pretty decent. Trying to think, have the Cardinals played Miami this season? I don't believe they have. But they also have Boston College. Boston College 14-14. They've struggled in conference play. They're 4-11. But Louisville will play both of those opponents for the. Actually, no, they beat Boston College by 8, only by 8. Back in the KFC Center. So. Nice week for the women's basketball team, and hopefully we can continue that momentum heading in to this week as well. But to conclude the show, we're going to dive into the weekly mailbag. It's been a little bit since we've done a weekly mailbag, but nonetheless, here we are. Before we do that, I want to say I appreciate the patience. I know that the programming and production schedule has kind of been all over the place, and that's been a result of, a hectic February for me, traveling for job, traveling, visiting family and things of that nature. I really do appreciate your all's patience. Like I said, trying to get content out in a timely manner, and I will, work to just continue to churn out episodes. So I appreciate your all's patience. Okay, final segment of the show, diving into the weekly mailbag. First question, actually the majority of these questions are surrounding the men's basketball team. First question is, with just a handful of regular season games to go, would you switch up the starting lineup? If so, what would it be? I assume by the starting lineup you're talking about Sydney Curry, J.J. Traynor, Jalen Withers, Mike James, and L. Ellis. Possibly. I honestly think that the only change I would make to the starting five is maybe the thing about it is he provides such a spark off the bench, but I think that you could go with starting either Kamari Lands or Emmanuel Okorafor. I think that they bring great energy. Kamari has kind of come into his own in terms of scoring. Emmanuel brings a great motor to the court, very solid on both ends of the court in terms of hustle, really putting a lot of effort in. I think that Sydney has just kind of been inconsistent. There will be times where he has a good game, and then there are times where he just struggles. I think that if I was to make a change, it would be bringing Kamari or Emmanuel into the starting lineup. Moving right on along into the next question. If the team were to add Sky Clark, and there's been rumors that they're going to add another big man from the international ranks in Africa, what would be the position needs moving forward? A little bit of everything, and I think guard play is at the forefront of the priority, right? Because that's what you need at this point in time. Sure, adding Sky Clark to the mix, a former very highly rated prospect, guy that started for Illinois as a true freshman for taking a break, a step away from basketball. I think that you would be bringing back the player from Africa, Emmanuel Okorafor. Probably Kamari Lands, probably obviously Sky Clark. I'm not sure who else outside of that. So I'm definitely talking about those five, but you never know who's looking to transfer out, who's looking to go elsewhere, possibly go to the NBA. I think ultimately you shouldn't have to have priority lists in terms of positions. It should just be adding best player available, because it's clear that this team definitely needs a roster, a roster turnover that's very significant, and adding some Power 5 ready players into the mix right away. Okay, next question. I just answered that. What are your thoughts on the new banner going to say coaches poll number 1? Look, I think you have to abide by what the NCAA says. All those people that are getting upset with Josh Hurd, I don't understand what else you want him to do. He could have just done nothing. In a perfect world, sure, you would want 2013 national champions up on the rafters at the KFC Yum Center. But, at least this team is getting recognized. I think this isn't going to be like the last set of negotiations. Like, I think Josh Hurd and company are still going to continue to push to get that, that credit and that recognition back. But I think that this is a good step in the right direction, getting some sort of a banner back and getting the team recognized this upcoming weekend. So I know that the team hasn't been doing great, but if you can, please go out and support the team this upcoming weekend and go see the 2013 National Championship squad. So final question for the mailbag. I've seen many different opinions about what the expectations should be next season. What do you think that they should be for the men's basketball team? I think I answered this a couple weeks ago. Look, I'll just lay it out in terms of my opinion. The expectations for Louisville basketball do not change because of the lack of success from a previous year or set of years. you know, because a coach and a team are not doing well, that doesn't mean that you should change the expectations of Louisville basketball. Because if you change them, this is not a blue blood. That's kind of where we're at. If you change them to make it to where, okay, well, it's just to, get to 500. This is not a blue blood because you're discrediting what can happen in an offseason. Because, a lot of the people have been disagreeing of whether or not Kenny Payne is the right guy for the job. Personally, I've seen a lot of differentiating opinions, but it seems like he's going to get a second year to see what he can do without an NCAA cloud over his head, right? Fair. With that being said, the results have to come in. Not only do you have to bring the players in this upcoming year, but you have to get the results. The expectations for me remain the same every single year. Now, obviously, maybe they're a little bit different in terms of the ceiling. And what I mean by that is I'm not saying going from 500 to making the NCAA tournament. Like the borderline is making the NCAA tournament. And then you determine, well, maybe it's, going up to the Sweet 16 and the Elite 8 or maybe even Final Four level. But you're at a point to where if you're saying that this team should go 500 and that should be the expectation, I can't in good faith sit here and agree with that. I respect it. I respect that point of view. You're allowed to have your opinion. I just disagree. I'm not going to lower the standard that Louisville basketball has put forth because of the lack of success. I'm just not going to, because that is severely discrediting this historical program. But not only that, it's discrediting the opportunity at stake. It's not like years past to where there's been an NCAA cloud over the head. There has been issues, not issues, but there hasn't been the one-time transfer rule. Look, you can change a team immediately. We've seen that happen. Missouri, LSU, Kansas State. Maybe Missouri and LSU aren't doing the greatest. Kansas State's absolutely turned it around. If you're Louisville basketball, which is a hands down better program than all three of those programs, there should be no issue being able to get the players into the system, getting the players into this program to be able to make the tournament in 2024. That should be a non-negotiable for Louisville fans. I think that, you have to make the tournament next year. There's no reason why you should not, because if your argument is that, well, you have to allow this team some time, we're past that point. We're past that point. Because I'm not saying that Kenny Payne has to win a national championship next season. I'm not saying that. I believe, there should be time in the role, but he should make the tournament next year. Because the issue was, or what was being told was that the NCAA cloud was, really putting a dampering on recruiting. Okay, that's fine. I understand. But now we're in a situation where you don't have that cloud over your head. You have the NIL infrastructure in place because you look at what football's doing. They're recruiting like at a level that we have never seen for Louisville football. At least not since the recruiting services started back in the late 90s, early 2000s. We are at a situation now to where the expectations should not change due to the lack of success. Because if you're saying that they should, then you're also arguing that this isn't the program that people think it is. Because I view Louisville basketball as a blue blood program. I think it's a top 5 program in the history of college basketball. I think it is. I think it's had continued success since the 80s, the Denny Crum era, through the Rick Pitino era. Sure, it's been some tough times. Was Kenny Payne dealt a tough hand? Sure. I think he was. There's no reason now, though, with the spots supposed to be open, with, essentially a year to address the 2023 class, or half a year, I should say. But with the transfer portal open and a lot of players, we saw a lot of, high-rated players come in. You could see that happening. So I just think that, in my opinion, is my thoughts on the matter. I don't think the expectations should change. If you disagree, I respect it. That's just my opinion. But that's going to wrap up today's episode of the show. Everyone have a great day. We'll see you back here very soon.